Let's move on to the NFL's. Some news came out this week from the Fritz Pollard Alliance, the group that monitors racial diversity in the NFL, LeVar. And there's a motion on the table for the league to consider assessing a 15-yard penalty for referees to assess that anytime they hear the N-word on the field next year. Give me your thoughts on that, having played in the league and now covering it.
I think in theory it sounds good, but in the heat of the moment, unless you're able to see a guy say it, it's moving so quickly out there on that field. And if you're hearing people talking trash, who's to say you know exactly who's saying what and at what point in time? And for what it's worth, whether it's right or wrong, there's a lot of trash talk that goes on that field. And there's a lot of words that are used that if you're going to open the forum up to penalizing for one word, then you would have to assume that you now have to start doing a list of words that you're not able to say on the football field. I think what would be more impactful with a rule like that would be to apply it in the locker room, apply it in the workplace in general, as opposed to on the playing field. The playing field is a violent, turbulent place, and I think that there still should be a level of control. There should be a level of integrity and respect for your fellow athletes and teammates. But I think that when you're looking at the weight of that, you're saying you're trying to set a standard that the N-word shouldn't be used, and it shouldn't be used in the workplace. I think that you should apply that to the locker room and the weight room and different things like that, because that's basically saying, look, let's get these young men to start appreciating where they work. Let's get them and help them understand that when you leave football, you're able to get away with how you dress, how you speak sometimes, how you interact in this environment, because it's a unique environment. But you still should be approaching that environment as if it is a true workplace. And I think that by instilling or putting a rule like that in place, it may begin to create a standard that has not been there. The locker room, the field, you can say exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it, when you want to say it, and there are no repercussions to it. So I think by adding something like that, I think you started in the locker room and you set that standard there. I think that would be the most impactful way to implement a rule like
sort
that.
Of leave it to the teams to sort of police that. Really.
Absolutely.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I can't disagree with anything LeVar said. I think the first thing that he mentioned, to me, is the biggest thing. If there's a scrum of guys and you hear that word coming out or any other offensive word, how in the world can you know who? I mean, if there was like a running transcript of everything that everyone said, maybe then you can say, oh, this person said this, but to me, it seems like opening yourself up. And if you falsely penalize one team for a word that the other team said, I mean, there's enough officiating problems in the NFL as it is. So that would be my one problem. The other thing is the other thing that LeVar mentioned. There are a lot of offensive words out there that some people are trying to kind of clear from the language. And I think whatever you think about that goal, I don't know how you could just pick one if you're going to go this way. We've seen guys get fined large amounts of money for using homophobic slurs. And with all the attention that those issues are getting right now, it seems weird that you would do this and not sort of introduce those other words at the same time. But then you've got like a whole list of, and I mean, I don't.
Pandora's box is what it really is.
Yeah. Obviously, none of us would be able to use words like that in our workplace in any kind of professional way without getting shown the door. But it's kind of a different situation.
Could you imagine walking out after the show's over? All right, my N-words. I'll holler at y'all N-words later.
Let's try it. Can we get someone with a handheld camera?
But that's really the reality of what goes on at these locker rooms.
And not just that either. We hear stories of, players spitting in each other's faces without getting penalized, players grabbing each other's private parts and squeezing, all kinds of.
That's a major part of the game.
And those things, whether they're against the law or not, the rules or not, it's not possible to police something like that. I think you have to just sort of.
As a secondary sort of. Let's assume this thing is adopted. I would think of it. Remember the controversy last year with the rule change with the ball carrier lowering his head, and you barely saw any flags, right? Yeah. I would wonder if it would be one of those that there's a lot of talk about on the front end, and rightly so. But then you rarely see a flag because it'd be very difficult to your guys' point.
I think it's a bigger headache unless you implement it in a place where you clearly can govern and monitor it. I think that you're running into a tremendous legal situation, a tremendous liability issue. As Dan mentioned, you penalize a guy that allegedly used that word. First of all, it's your word versus his word in that moment. That's first and foremost. But secondly,
There's mics everywhere.
if
though.
you have, but how do you place them? How do you play? There's
cameras
mics
and
everywhere,
mic.
okay, but there's cameras everywhere. But how do you place those words?
Yeah, so that would be an argument for fining guys after the fact. If you
Right.
hear that, if you hear it, and you can see who's saying it. But that's a lot different than an official calling it live.
Right.
In the heat of
That's
battle.
still very difficult to be
Yeah.
able to identify who's saying what when you hear it on those mega boom mics.
What would be more detrimental to a player, a flag or a hit in his pocketbook? What would be?
I certainly believe that if you hit somebody in their pocketbook, that's going to hit closer to home because that's personalized. Whereas you got to hope and pray that that player in particular is a team player and
Fine would be more of a
values
deterrent.
and values the fact that if I get a penalty,
Yeah.
I'm hurting my team by getting this penalty. But you go in their pocketbook, that's certainly going to make more of an impact on somebody.